Okay, me again, I'm back. I have read 5 more books. Listen, I've been feeling kind of down lately, to put it lightly, and reading has offered me a most needed and most appreciated escape from my life. So I have been really zooming through them, as they say, but I don't think that the next 5 is gonna drop quite this quickly. Okay, I'm slowing it down a little bit, taking my time, reading longer books. So let's just go, okay? Okay, up first is Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. This was aptly named, and it was pretty short and sweet. It's about a woman with her young daughter visiting like a small town as kind of a vacation, getting out of the big city, and what happens to the two of them, and also what has happened to families there in the past. I think it takes place in Argentina. It's about the harmful effects of pesticide use, basically, especially on like rural and poorer areas, and that's all I'm gonna say. It was so beautifully written. It was, I don't even know, like while I was reading it, I said to my friend CJ, who recommended it to me, that I only wished that it were longer, but by the time I finished it, that was not the case. I did not wish it was longer. It was just right. It was so, so good. I rated it 4 stars, and I kind of feel like I have to change it to a 5-star because I've been thinking about it. So, good start. Okay. Up next, I read Outlawed by Anna North. This was my first book of the month club pick, and it was pitched as, and it is, a feminist Western. It takes place in the 18-somethings, kind of in like an alternate timeline where a huge disease killed off like most people, and now the societies that remain have like repopulating as their main priority. So there's a huge emphasis on having as many children as possible, and a huge stigma placed on families or women who don't have that many kids. The story is about one woman, Ada, who has trained with her mother to be a midwife for her whole life. She has a lot of medical knowledge, and she's, well respected in her community, but she is barren, and once that becomes evident to the community, they basically cast her out as a witch, and etc., blah, blah, blah. She ends up with these outlaws. A group of outlaws who run around doing outlaw things. So this gang of outlaws is mostly made up of other barren women who have fled their respective communities, and their leader, the kid, remains ungendered throughout. There are some other queer things going on, but mostly it's just about, like, I don't know, there's some found family elements, it's a Western, I don't know, what's a Western about? Horses, pistols. I wanted to love this book. I wanted this to be everything that I didn't get from Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey, and it wasn't that, but it was good. It was fine. It was 3 stars for me. This story was just a little bit too contrived, and heavy-handed at times, and overall just not super compelling for me. Like, I believe that there's an audience for this book, but I just don't think that I was really it, which means maybe it's just not being marketed correctly, because it seems like it would definitely be like my exact thing that I wanted. Up next is The Black Tides of Heaven by Neon Yang. This book was pretty short, and it is a fantasy story about a pair of twins, and we sort of follow them from their birth into their adult life. And their mother is the like supreme ruler of this world, and we get to see how each of them rebels against that in their own way. My experience reading this was just that it was too short. This book was like 200 pages maybe, but it needed to be 400 plus pages. There was just too much going on. We spanned most of their young lives. Like, it was too much. Pitched, I guess, as a queer fantasy. So in this world, initially everyone is raised non-binary. Everyone is using gender-neutral pronouns, and then everyone has like a gender confirmation ceremony sometime before they reach adulthood to say, this is my gender, and then they move forward with that gender. So that's really a cool concept, but it is not that much of the plot, or it could have been if maybe the book had been longer, and it should have been. There were moments of tension surrounding that concept that were just completely like, we just keep moving. Like, we don't stop to think about it. We just keep going towards what? What are we going towards? This book was too fast and too much happened. Like, the potential, you know? There was such a fun, like, magic system that I wanted to know more about. There were some creatures. There was just like a whole world existing, and, you know, an oppressive regime and like a rebellion stirring, and we just didn't really get to like get into any of that. It was like a memo. So maybe there are people who do like books like this, but I am so not one of them. I was excited about this book and it really let me down. I will not be continuing with the series. I don't know. It had Legend of Korra vibes though, I will say. Like, maybe too many Legend of Korra vibes, and not the ones that I wanted. Anyway, I gave it 3 stars. I know I basically said nothing good about it, but yeah, it was fine. Maybe I should change it to 2. No, because like the characters, like what little I did get to know of them, I liked and I wanted more. So I feel like that's a sign of, like, I don't know, just that I wanted more makes me want to give it 3 stars instead of 2. I don't need to justify my star ratings here, okay? It was 3 stars and I didn't like it. So the 4th book that I finished was When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. This one was good. This book was a thriller about gentrification. Basically, our main character, Sydney, lives in this neighborhood in Brooklyn, a Black community where her neighbors are leaving on short notice and white people are moving in, and it just feels a little bit more sinister than the standard gentrification sinisterness. She ends up like kind of acquiring this sidekick who is like a white dude bro, and like does not know how much he doesn't know, and together they just try and figure stuff out. Yeah. This is another book where I've heard many say that it was too heavy-handed, a little too over the top, but I feel like maybe those people were feeling attacked by this book. Maybe it's not as over the top as they're saying, because, you know, it's a thriller, it's a novel, but all of the things, the scary, unsettling, upsetting things that happen were not like impossible at all. They were, until the very end, it's dicey. But I think that was kind of like the spookiest part, was that everything that happened that was like, and then, I was like, probably, yeah. So we should all be thinking about gentrification, if you're not already. I guess having like an over-the-top theme an over-the-top message is just not something that bothers me when it's in a thriller. That could be. But overall, the writing of this was good. The characters, I loved them. The history, the research, like, it was a good book. Really good. Thrilling. Okay. 4 stars. Mostly, there was a sex scene that was so unwarranted. So, the 5th book that I finished was Winter Counts by David Hesco Wanbley Wyden. This was also a book that I got from Book of the Month. And it slapped. I loved this. It's a crime novel about our main character Virgil is sort of the vigilante enforcer on the Rosebud Indian Reservation in South Dakota, which, according to the author's note, is a real phenomenon. The tribal police only have a certain amount of jurisdiction, and serious crimes need to be referred to federal agents, and the feds pretty much never care. So there are people on the res who you can pay to, like, dole out justice, basically. So Virgil beats people up for a living. The story is about him getting hired for this job to stop the guy who is bringing hard drugs onto the reservation. But it quickly becomes more complicated than that. Virgil now has to deal with some, like, family stuff. He's also, like, maybe reconnecting with an ex and, you know, trying to raise a teenager. It's a mess. Basically, he's got to come to terms with his family, his culture, the part he wants to play in his community, and deal with, like, all this, like, family trauma, but also, like, generational trauma. So this was not a light book, but it was excellent. You know, there's a lot of bad stuff happening. There's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of pain and suffering, but there's also, I mean, like, everything else, like community, friends, joy, family. Like, it was very much like a real world picture that he painted for me. Let's talk about pacing, okay? The pacing of this book was phenomenal, and maybe if I had not been reading books with bad pacing right before this, maybe this wouldn't have blown me away so much. I shall not spoil anything because you should read this book, but there's a situation with many phases, okay? Like, things have to happen, and then, you know, you have to wait before the next thing can happen. And so in a lot of books, I think that the author will skip over the time in between. Like, something happens, and then we skip to 3 days later when the next thing is happening, or even, you know, just the next day. We just get right to the next action point so that we can have, like, a steep trajectory to, you know, the climax. But in this book, we hang with Virgil while he's waiting for the next thing to happen. And, you know, we sit with him in his anxiety, in his uncertainty, his, like, restless, like, want to do something but don't want to mess anything up, his like, and other stuff. You know, there's, like, not a lot of side plot, but there is some other stuff going on that he has to deal with. And so, because, you know, we're doing stuff with Virgil, waiting for this thing to happen, I'm anxious about it, he's anxious about it, and then the next thing happens, and then it's like, okay, now we have to wait for the next thing, and I'm like, oh my god, what are we gonna do for 2 days while we wait for that? By the time things started happening in this book, my heart was pounding. I was laying on the couch, I had to put the book down and do some deep breathing. I was activated. So that, to me, is masterful. I loved this. It was, I'm sure, not a perfect book. There was some violence in it that I actually really didn't like, but just, like I didn't even really care about the mystery when it finally happened. Like, when you finally find out, like, when it's solved, I didn't even care because I cared so much more about the family aspect and the relationships. That was like what was, you know, keeping me moving through the story. I was like, yeah, whatever, when we got to the end. Hopefully some of that's coherent. Honestly, I could keep talking about winter counts, but also probably most of these, but I will not. I will try to keep this video short. Yeah, I have to be done now. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss episode 3 whenever that drops. Yeah, thank you, and I will see you later. Bye.